So I'm Mark Hartley, I'm the founder of BankiFi, and BankiFi was actually set up to take advantage of open banking, but with a nuance to actually help the traditional banks become third-party processors rather than be disintermediated or competed against by third-party processors. And the other nuance is that we focus on business banking rather than consumer banking.
It's very interesting. It's quite a good addition to our panel, that's for sure. A really good question. What is banking as a service or banking as a platform? What does it mean, and what's open banking got to do with it?
So my definition of banking as a platform, if you think about a platform as a broker, so the broker has two sides to it, or it facilitates two sides. One is the providers of services, which could be one or more banks. And then on the other side, you have the consumers of the services that are provided through that brokerage platform. And that could be applications, it could be services, it could be users. And so what you have is a two-sided model where the consumers and the service providers are brought together through this brokerage platform. So as I say, it can be one or more banks. I prefer to look at it in the context of open banking as more than one bank rather than a bank provider like perhaps a Rails bank or a Clear bank. I would like to think of it as more it's access to more banks through that open banking ecosystem.
The FCA has published a call for input to share, I guess, ideas and maybe concerns in terms of what if open banking was to evolve and become open finance and what it would look like. So I know that you said that it was mostly aimed at sort of consumers and users, but not as much for small or medium-sized enterprises. So could you share your opinion? What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say good on the FCA for actually doing this call to arms, to actually get input from the industry, to actually broaden the opportunity to discuss what open finance might be. Like everything that's happened previously, it's been very consumer-led. So I actually described open banking as the law of unintended consequences, where actually the regulators were trying to push competition in the consumer space, and actually what I think will happen is that it'll just increase the stranglehold that the incumbents have on the marketplace. Equally, I also think that the SME and business segments have got as much to offer in terms, or open banking or open finance should have more to offer than it does in consumer land. So the paper is very much focused on wealth management, pensions, insurance, mortgages, etc. Where I would have liked to have seen much more emphasis on business, so access to things like data that might be held at HMRC, a company's house. And last but not least, I think the banks have had a bit of a raw deal, frankly. They've been forced to open up their data sources, whereas third-party processors haven't. So I hope, and I'll be certainly putting my two penneth in to say I'd like to see the likes of Xero and Sage and QuickBooks and the accounting packages have to open up through a regulatory-driven scenario where the data that they hold, which is my businesses, I should be able to share that with whomever I so wish. So those are the sorts of things I'll be lobbying for in our response to the call to action.
It's brilliant. Well, at least we know one person is definitely responding to that call for input. I'm sure it would be more than one. I'm being facetious. How do you see open banking evolving, and how would that affect banking as a platform in the future? What would you say?
So a lot of people think open banking and banking as a platform can be slightly competitive. I actually think it's one and the same thing. I think the way it should evolve is you get this truly agnostic scenario where the customer, be that a consumer or a business, has the ultimate choice of getting access to data. And I think we get too hung up on open banking rather than open data or and even open finance. I think it needs to be open data. So I actually think the way it needs to evolve is that this idea that the customer owns their data and that parties that hold data on our behalf are actually the custodians of our data. And I actually would like to see it evolve into something that is effectively whatever data I have in different places, I should be able to share that with whomever I so wish, and I should be able to monetize it, not people monetizing me out of my own data. So that's the way I'd like to see it evolve, and that would be the same for individuals or businesses.
That's fascinating. How would you monetize it as an individual?
I'd sell it. You can subscribe to me rather than subscribing to Facebook.
Will you provide protections?
Well, I think there are already things in there around GDPR, consensual access to data, audit trails, all that kind of good stuff. I think obviously identity, there needs a lot of work to be done around that. And maybe I'm just, I like to think of the idealist view of the world, but it would be great to think that individuals and business can monetize their data rather than it being used to monetize against them.
Well, that's why we call you open banking pioneers, because you've got ideas, you drive it, which is great. Well, tonight you're joining our open banking excellence community. Thank you once again. How our community, our open banking community, could actually support open banking wider adoption? How could we see and maybe help the likes of FCA to drive into the world of open finance?
I think one of the biggest problems in this space is we all get a bit insular and we all get a bit hung up on technology and terminology, and I think we really need to start using language that is actually meaningful to the people that will most benefit from it, which is consumers and people and businesses out there. So rather than talking about open banking, I think we need to start talking about solutions and benefits to people rather than technical terms and using lots of acronyms. So I think one of the biggest things is perhaps not education but awareness. There's a big lack of awareness out there in the big wide world. I talk to friends who are not in the industry and they have no idea what open banking is, and frankly they don't care. We need to put it in the context of how it gives them value in their life. So the biggest thing for me is awareness and education.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.